Atlanta, Georgia, was beginning to wake up with the first light of day. The streets, still tranquil, were slowly coming to life with the movement of cars and people heading to work. In the heart of the city, the Atlanta Municipal Court was in full swing. Diana Harper, a 50-year-old judge known for her integrity and courage, was ready for another challenging day. Inside the courtroom, Diana was reviewing the papers on her desk. Her eyes, always sharp and unyielding, reflected a mix of wisdom and determination. Beside her, legal assistant Mark Reynolds was going over the morning's files. "Good morning, Mark," Diana said, looking up from the documents. "What's on the docket today?" Mark adjusted his glasses and checked the schedule. "We have the assault case involving Officer Carter and Officer Lawson. The hearing is set for 10 a.m. However, I received a tip that might complicate things." Diana raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "I got an anonymous tip. It says the officers aren't just involved in assaults, but also in corruption and systematic racism. We don't have much evidence yet, but it's something to keep an eye on," Mark explained. Diana furrowed her brow. "If these allegations are true, we have a very serious issue on our hands. We need to make sure we're handling this correctly. We can't allow these types of abuses to go unnoticed." At 10 a.m., the courtroom was buzzing with anticipation. The assault case was one of the most talked about in the city, and many eyes were on the court. The presiding judge called the case, and the parties presented themselves. Carter and Lawson, both with stern expressions and authoritative postures, were accompanied by their lawyers. Defense attorney Henry Collins began presenting his case. "Your Honor, my client, Officer Carter, denies all allegations. He and Officer Lawson were simply doing their jobs. These accusations are baseless and driven by personal resentment." Diana watched attentively. When it was her turn to question, she asked calmly, "Officer Carter, could you tell us about the incident that night? What prompted the use of force?" Carter, with a rigid gaze, responded, "It was a high-tension situation. The suspect was acting aggressively and defiantly. We had no choice but to use force to control the situation." Diana tilted her head, studying him with a penetrating look. "Are you aware that there are allegations that you and Officer Lawson have a history of similar behavior in other cases? There are people who claim that you disregard citizens' rights." The officers exchanged discreet glances, and Carter responded defensively. "This is an attempt to discredit our profession. There is no basis for these claims." After the hearing, Diana returned to her office, where Mark was waiting. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think we're only scratching the surface," Diana replied with a worried expression. "These officers have something to hide, and the anonymous tip might be the beginning of something much bigger. We need to investigate further." Mark nodded. "I'll start gathering more information and looking for any additional evidence we can use." Diana looked out the window of her office, observing the city she loved and protected. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but she also understood the importance of her mission. Atlanta needed justice, and she was ready to fight for it, no matter the risks involved. "We're going to do this the right way, Mark," Diana said, with a firmness that reflected her determination. "We can't let corruption and racism prevail. We're going to uncover the truth, no matter what it takes." Mark agreed with a nod, and the two began preparing for the next challenge. The fight for justice in Atlanta was just beginning. The morning heat in Atlanta was starting to intensify, mirroring the tense atmosphere settling over the city. In Diana Harper's office, the air was charged with a growing sense of urgency. Diana was buried in a stack of documents related to the assault case, trying to find any clues that might confirm the allegations of corruption against Officers Carter and Lawson. Mark Reynolds entered the office with a concerned look. "Diana, you need to see this," he said, holding a brown envelope. "I received a mysterious package in my office. There was no return address." Diana looked up and took the envelope carefully. "Let's open it and see what we have." Mark tore open the envelope and pulled out a set of documents and photographs. The images showed Carter and Lawson in compromising situations, suspicious meetings with individuals known for illegal activities, and a series of reports that seemed to indicate evidence tampering. Diana examined the photos closely. "This is exactly what we needed. It looks like there's a much larger network of corruption involved." We need to verify the authenticity of these documents immediately. Mark looked at her a bit worried. Do you think these officers might have allies within the department? It's very possible, Diana replied with a grave expression. If they have access to confidential information and protection from influential people, exposing them will be an even bigger challenge. As Diana and Mark began reviewing the evidence, Diana received a call. It was Lieutenant James Hawkins, a veteran of the police department known for his ethical stance and his desire to root out corruption within the force. Judge Harper, Hawkins began in a serious tone, I've heard about the case you're handling. I'm not sure who's behind this, but I have information that might help. Diana leaned back in her chair, intrigued. What do you know, Lieutenant Hawkins? Carter and Lawson have been a problem for years. They use their positions to intimidate and silence anyone who opposes them, Hawkins explained. Additionally, I've heard rumors that they have a scheme to cover up their illegal activities. I have some contacts who might be able to confirm this. I need you to provide more details and, if possible, witnesses willing to speak, Diana said, determined. We need to make sure all information is gathered securely. I'll do what I can, Hawkins replied. But be careful. These men are dangerous and have many resources. They won't hesitate to use force to protect their interests. Diana thanked him and hung up the call, turning to Mark. Let's follow the lieutenant's advice. We need to ensure our sources are secure and gather all the evidence we can. Later that day, Diana and Mark met with a retired police officer who was willing to talk. His name was Paul Matthews, and he looked visibly nervous. I have information that could be crucial, Paul said, his voice trembling. I worked with Carter and Lawson in the past. They have a corruption scheme involving protecting criminals in exchange for money. And there's more. They also have records of violent and racist encounters that were never officially documented. Diana listened intently. Can you prove these claims? If you have any documents or recordings, they will be vital for the case. Paul hesitated before pulling a USB drive from his pocket. Here it is. It contains recordings of conversations and documents that I managed to keep confidential. I hope this helps. Diana took the USB drive and examined it carefully. Thank you, Paul. Your help might be the key to bringing these men to justice. As the day turned into night, Diana and Mark were exhausted but determined. The city of Atlanta was beginning to wake up to the seriousness of the situation, and Diana knew the battle was just beginning. With new evidence in hand and the support of unexpected allies, she was more determined than ever to confront corruption and ensure justice prevailed. As Diana looked out at the city lights from her window, she felt a weight in her chest, but also a spark of hope. She knew the journey would be long and fraught with danger, but she was prepared to face it all to make sure the truth came to light. The early signs of morning in Atlanta brought a light breeze that swayed the trees along the busy streets. In Diana Harper's office, the sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the documents and the desk cluttered with notes. Diana and Mark Reynolds were immersed in the newly received evidence, analyzing each detail carefully. Diana looked at the recordings and documents with a focused expression. These files are a goldmine, Mark. We need to go through each of these recordings to find something that can be used in court. Mark nodded as he connected the USB drive to the computer. I'll start listening to the recordings. It might be a lengthy process, but it's essential to see what we can find that's most significant. As the day progressed, Diana and Mark were absorbed in their intense work. Among the documents, they found records showing suspicious payments and contacts between Carter and Lawson with individuals tied to organized crime. The recordings revealed conversations where the officers discussed ways to cover up abuses and manipulate investigations. Diana, listen to this, Mark called out with an excited tone. This recording is of a conversation between Carter and a known drug dealer. They're discussing a scheme to protect a drug shipment in exchange for a sum of money. Diana listened to the recording, her expression growing graver. This is exactly what we needed. If we can corroborate these conversations with other evidence, we might have a solid foundation for the prosecution. At that moment, Diana's phone rang. It was Lieutenant Hawkins again. Judge Harper, we have a problem, Hawkins began, his voice urgent. I've discovered that Carter and Lawson are trying to intimidate witnesses. I've received reports that they're making intimidating visits to the homes of people who might testify against them. Diana frowned. That's not surprising, unfortunately. We need to ensure the witnesses' safety and gather more evidence before they can interfere with the case. I'll mobilize a team to protect the witnesses, Hawkins assured. But I also think it would be wise to start preparing a contingency plan in case things get more complicated. I agree. I'll organize a meeting with the prosecution to discuss the next steps, Diana said, already thinking about how to strengthen the case. During the meeting with the prosecution, Diana presented the new evidence and reported the threat to the witnesses' safety. The lead prosecutor, Sarah Thompson, was clearly impressed with the progress of the case. Diana, you've done an outstanding job uncovering this evidence, Sarah praised. But we need to make sure everything is in order before we present it in court. If the officers try to discredit our evidence, we'll need a strong defense. I'm aware of that, Diana responded. We'll coordinate our efforts with the police and ensure all evidence is well documented and verified. We can't leave any gaps that the defense could exploit. As Diana and Sarah discussed strategy, Mark entered the room with an anxious expression. Diana, I just got a call from one of the informants. He's worried about his safety and asked to meet with you. Diana frowned. We need to meet with him immediately. If he has additional information, it could be crucial to the case. The meeting with the informant took place in a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. The informant, a man named Eric, was nervous and looked around constantly. Judge Harper, I have something that might help, Eric said in a low tone. In addition to the recordings and documents, I discovered that Carter and Lawson are planning something big. They're setting up an operation to siphon a large amount of money from the department. Diana looked at him with a serious expression. Can you provide me with more details about this? Yes, Eric continued. I overheard conversations about an operation that's supposed to happen soon. If we can monitor this operation and gather evidence, we might have a chance to dismantle their entire network. Diana made a quick note. We'll coordinate with the police to ensure everything is monitored. Your information might be the final piece we need to secure a conviction. With the new information, Diana and her team intensified their efforts. The city was gearing up for a showdown between justice and corruption, and Diana was at the heart of the battle, determined to uncover the hidden truth and see justice prevail. As night fell over Atlanta, Diana reflected on the challenges ahead. The fight was just beginning, but she knew that truth and justice were on her side. The sun had barely set in Atlanta, but the city was bustling with activity, charged with the tension in the air. Diana Harper, aware of the imminent dangers, was preparing for a strategic meeting with her investigative team and police allies. The atmosphere in the courthouse conference room was thick with nervousness and determination. Mark Reynolds had a stack of reports and documents spread out in front of him. Diana, the records for the operation Eric mentioned are being analyzed. The information suggests that the money diversion operation is set to take place next week. Diana, with a resolute expression, responded, We need to make sure everything is in place before this operation. If we can intercept and document the money diversion, it could be the definitive proof we need against Carter and Lawson. At that moment, Lieutenant James Hawkins entered the room with a concerned look. Judge Harper, I've received information that Carter and Lawson are trying to identify and intimidate those who might testify against them. We need to ensure the safety of these people. Diana nodded, her gaze firm. Let's reinforce witness protection and make sure there are no further leaks of information. Every detail is crucial for the success of the case. As they discussed strategy, an intelligence officer entered the room with an updated report. Ma'am, we've managed to track some of Carter and Lawson's financial contacts. They're involved in suspicious transactions that align with the money diversion reports. Diana leaned in to review the report. Great work. We need to work with the fraud team to trace these funds and ensure we have solid evidence. Mark looked at Diana with a worried expression. The situation is getting more complicated. Carter and Lawson seem to have an extensive network of protection. Do you think we'll be able to secure a solid conviction? Diana took a deep breath, her resolve unwavering. We need to trust in the strength of the evidence we have and the courage of our witnesses. The judicial system may be slow and complex, but the truth will always find a way. Later, Diana and Mark met with a group of investigators at the police office to coordinate surveillance of the diversion operation. The team was equipped with monitoring and recording equipment to ensure that every move was documented. Team, our mission is straightforward. We need to identify and record all illegal financial activity during the operation, Diana instructed. We'll maintain discreet surveillance and ensure all evidence is collected without alerting those involved. The investigators nodded, ready to begin. Diana and Mark prepared for a long night, observing activities from a temporary command center set up for the operation. Hours passed, and the tension in the air was palpable. Diana monitored the real-time recordings, her hands trembling slightly as she awaited any crucial evidence. Finally, the operation began to unfold. Officers Carter and Lawson appeared on the footage, receiving packages and handing over large sums of money. "Diana, we're seeing everything we need," Mark whispered, watching the recordings. "If these records are confirmed, we'll have solid proof to convict them." Diana nodded, her eyes fixed on the screen. "Let's keep monitoring and ensure all evidence is documented accurately." By early the next morning, the diversion operation had been recorded and the individuals involved identified. Diana and her team were exhausted, but relieved with the amount of evidence collected. As Diana walked out of the command center, Lieutenant Hawkins approached. "Judge Harper, the operation was a success. We managed to arrest some of the participants and have a substantial amount of evidence against Carter and Lawson." Diana smiled, a mix of relief and determination on her face. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. Now we need to prepare everything for the trial. We have a real chance to ensure these corrupt officers face justice." With the success of the operation, Diana knew the battle was far from over. The fight to expose corruption and ensure justice was just beginning, and she was ready to face every challenge that came her way. The truth was now closer to being revealed, and Diana was determined to see it through to the end. Dawn in Atlanta brought an air of unease. Diana Harper was starting her day in her office, reviewing preparations for the trial of Carter and Lawson. The pressure to ensure that all evidence was presented effectively was immense, and Diana was determined not to leave anything to chance. Mark Reynolds entered the office with a concerned look. "Diana, we need to talk. I received some strange messages this morning. It seems someone is trying to access our files." Diana frowned. "That's not good. The security of our information is crucial to the success of the case. Let's check the system and make sure everything is secure." As Mark reviewed the computer security settings, Diana received a call from her assistant, Carla. "Judge Harper, you need to come to your car right away. We've received a report of something suspicious happening in the garage." Diana felt a chill. "Thank you, Carla. I'll be there soon." She hurried to the courthouse garage, where she found security stationed next to her vehicle. A police officer, with a serious expression, approached her. "Judge Harper, we found this message on your car's windshield," the officer said, handing her a crumpled piece of paper. Diana unfolded the paper and read the message. "Stop your investigation or you will regret it." Her heart raced, but her expression remained resolute. "It looks like they're trying to intimidate us. We need to increase security immediately." Back in the office, Diana met with Mark, who was reviewing the security of digital files. "Diana, we've managed to block unauthorized access attempts, but the message on your car is a clear warning. We need to act quickly." Diana nodded. "Let's talk to Lieutenant Hawkins and ensure he arranges extra protection. We can't let this stop us from moving forward." In Hawkins' office, the lieutenant was reviewing the witness protection list and checking additional security measures. When Diana and Mark arrived, Hawkins stood up immediately. "Judge Harper, Mark, what's going on?" Hawkins asked, his tone filled with concern. Diana quickly explained the situation. "We've received a direct threat. They're trying to intimidate us into dropping the case. We need to ensure extra protection for ourselves and the witnesses." Hawkins frowned. "I'll arrange for a security team to accompany you and Mark. I'll also reinforce witness protection and monitor for any suspicious activity." Mark, still visibly shaken, added, "Additionally, we should consider temporarily changing our routines to avoid any patterns they might use to track us." "I agree," Diana said. "Let's carefully plan our movements and ensure all communication is secure." As the afternoon progressed, Diana and Mark began working with the additional security measures. They adjusted their routines and communicated through secure channels, while Hawkins' security team monitored the area around the courthouse and Diana's home. That night, Diana was at home, still feeling the constant sense of vigilance. As she was getting ready for bed, she heard a noise coming from the entrance. Her heart raced, and she immediately grabbed the phone, calling the security team. "We have a situation," she said urgently. "Something strange is happening here." The security team arrived quickly and inspected the area around the house, but found no signs of a break-in. However, the incident underscored the need for even stricter security measures. The next morning, Diana met Mark in her office as they prepared for the day. Mark looked tired but determined. "Diana, it seems they're not going to stop. We should expect more attempts at intimidation," Mark said, his voice tinged with concern. Diana nodded with a resolute expression. "We can't back down. The truth needs to prevail, and we can't let fear paralyze us. We'll continue with the case and ensure justice is served no matter what." As Diana and Mark prepared for the next day, the sense of threat hung in the air, but their determination to seek justice and expose corruption remained steadfast. The battle to protect the truth was far from over, and Diana was ready to face any obstacles that came her way. Atlanta woke up under a layer of fog, mirroring the tense atmosphere surrounding the courthouse. Despite the threats and intimidation attempts, Diana Harper was ready to take another crucial step in the case against officers Carter and Lawson. The trial was approaching, and preparations were intense. Diana was reviewing the final evidence with Mark Reynolds in her office. "Are we ready for the trial?" Diana asked, with a tone of anxiety and determination. Mark looked over the documents and recordings organized in folders. "Yes, Diana. We have the recordings, financial documents, and witness statements. But we still need to prepare our witnesses for court." Diana nodded. "Let's make sure they're prepared and safe. We can't afford any mistakes." As they discussed the final preparations, Diana received a call from Lieutenant Hawkins. "Judge Harper, we need to talk. We've received information that Carter and Lawson are pressuring some witnesses and trying to bribe them." Diana's expression turned worried. "That's not surprising. We need to make sure our witnesses feel safe and confident. I'll gather all of them for a final preparation before the trial." In the afternoon, Diana organized a meeting with the witnesses. The meeting took place in a secure location, away from prying eyes. The witnesses were a mix of former colleagues, citizens who had witnessed the abuses, and informants who had provided crucial evidence. "I know many of you are nervous," Diana began, "but the truth you have to tell is vital for ensuring justice. We need you to stay strong and courageous." One of the witnesses, a former officer named Eric, voiced his concerns. "Judge Harper, what if they try something during the trial? What if there are attempts to intimidate people in the courtroom?" "We'll have a security team in the courtroom," Diana responded, "and we'll do everything possible to ensure the process is as secure as it can be. I trust you all and the power of the truth. Justice depends on us." With the witnesses prepared and security reinforced, the day of the trial arrived. The courthouse was packed with reporters and interested citizens. Diana and her team were at the center of a battle that was not just legal, but a direct confrontation with power and corruption. At the start of the session, Carter and Lawson entered the courtroom, accompanied by their lawyers. The two officers were visibly tense but tried to maintain a confident facade. Defense attorney Henry Collins made a grand entrance, his demeanor challenging. "Your Honor, we are here to defend the integrity of my clients," Collins began with an arrogant tone. "These accusations are merely an attempt to discredit the work of men who have dedicated their lives to public service." Diana stood up with a firm posture. "We will show in court that the charges are based on solid evidence, and that the defendants are far from the heroes they claim to be." The first day of the trial was filled with tension and emotion. Diana presented the evidence and witnesses, who provided detailed testimonies about the abuses committed by Carter and Lawson. The recordings and documents were submitted as evidence, and the audience was attentive to every detail. During the lunch break, Diana met Mark in the courthouse cafeteria, both with tired but determined expressions. "How are you feeling?" Mark asked, trying to ease the tension. "I'm focused," Diana replied, with a steady gaze. "But I know we still have a long way to go." The defense will try everything to discredit our evidence and witnesses. Mark nodded. I'll review the testimonies and prepare our questions for cross-examination. We need to be ready for anything they throw at us. As the trial progressed, Diana and Mark faced a series of aggressive tactics from the defense. Attorney Collins tried to shift the focus and attack the credibility of the witnesses, but Diana and her team were prepared for every maneuver. The courtroom was in constant motion, and emotions were running high. Diana knew the real challenge was just beginning. With each passing day, the battle grew more intense, but Diana was determined to see justice served, no matter the cost. As the sun set over Atlanta, Diana and Mark reviewed the next steps in the case. The journey was far from over, and the fight for truth and justice continued, fiercer than ever. The second day of the trial began with palpable tension. The courtroom was packed, and television cameras were ready to capture every moment of the legal battle. Diana Harper and her team were on the front lines, prepared to face the defensive tactics of attorney Henry Collins and the defendants, officers Carter and Lawson. Diana entered the courtroom, her gaze fixed and determined. Mark Reynolds stood by her side, reviewing the final documents and fine-tuning the details. "Are we ready for today?" Diana asked, a mix of nervousness and confidence in her voice. Mark looked at her with an encouraging smile. "Yes, Diana. We have a solid plan, and all the evidence is organized. We just need to stay calm and focused." The judge entered the room, and the court was back in session. Henry Collins stood up with a serious demeanor. "Today, we will continue presenting the defense for the defendants. We call Captain Greg Matthews, a longtime colleague of Carter and Lawson, to the stand." Captain Matthews entered the room, impeccably dressed in his uniform and wearing a confident look. He approached the witness stand and was sworn in. "Captain Matthews, can you tell us about the reputation of Carter and Lawson within the department?" Collins asked. Matthews, with a thoughtful expression, replied, "Carter and Lawson are known for their hard work and dedication to the law. They've never had any issues with conduct during my years of service with them." Diana watched closely, knowing that the defense was trying to establish a positive image of the defendants. When it was her turn to question, she stood and approached the witness stand. "Captain Matthews, are you aware of any specific incidents that might suggest questionable behavior by the defendants?" Diana asked, her tone direct. Matthews hesitated before answering. "No, I am not aware of any irregularities." Diana then presented new evidence, a series of reports and testimonies detailing abuses of power and racism by Carter and Lawson. The evidence included records of complaints and testimonies from victims who had been ignored or mistreated by the officers. "Captain Matthews, these documents show a pattern of behavior that contradicts what you've described. How do you explain this?" Diana asked, maintaining her focus. Matthews looked at the documents, and his expression shifted to one of discomfort. "I'm not aware of these incidents. This is new to me." Diana knew the defense would try to divert attention to other issues. "So, Captain Matthews, you confirm that these documents were not discussed with you previously? That you had no knowledge of these abuses until now?" "Yes, that's correct," Matthews responded. Diana then turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I request that these pieces of evidence be considered as part of the case. They demonstrate a pattern of abuse and corruption that must be taken seriously." The judge nodded, indicating that the evidence would be considered. With that, Diana paused, observing the impact of her questions and evidence. During the lunch break, Diana and Mark met in the courthouse break room. "It seems like the defense is trying to attack every piece of evidence we present," Mark said, with a note of frustration. "We're holding our ground, but they're doing everything they can to discredit our witnesses." Diana agreed. "The truth is in our hands, and we need to make sure the court sees it clearly. We must continue presenting the evidence clearly and consistently." As they spoke, Diana received a call from Carla, her assistant. "Judge Harper, we've received an anonymous threat. They said they're going to do something to harm the case if you keep pressing." Diana's face went pale, but her resolve didn't waver. "Stay calm and keep monitoring the situation. We can't let this intimidate us. We'll continue with the trial." Back in the courtroom, Diana and her team continued to present evidence and testimonies. Tensions rose, and the legal battle intensified. Carter and Lawson were visibly uneasy, and the pressure was mounting for everyone involved. At the end of the day, Diana gathered her team to discuss their progress. "We're facing a tough battle, but every piece of evidence and every witness counts. Let's keep fighting for the truth and justice." Mark, still visibly tired, responded with an encouraging tone. "We're doing a good job. The evidence is being presented, and the truth is becoming clearer each day." As night fell over Atlanta, Diana knew the trial was approaching a crucial juncture. The fight to expose corruption and ensure justice was far from over, and the pressure was only increasing. But Diana was determined to face every challenge, with truth as her guide and justice as her ultimate goal. The fourth day of the trial brought a sense of mounting tension and anticipation. Diana Harper and her team were preparing for the most critical moment: the testimony of Eric, the informant who had provided crucial information about Carter and Lawson's corrupt activities. Eric was a key piece in the case, and his testimony could be the key to securing a conviction. Diana and Mark were in a preparation room, going over the final details. "Eric should be our big ace," Diana said, looking at Mark. "We need to make sure he's ready for what comes next." Mark was organizing questions for cross-examination. "The defense will try to discredit Eric. We need to be prepared to protect his credibility and ensure his story is clear and compelling." The judge entered the courtroom, and the session resumed. Carter and Lawson sat with tense expressions, and Henry Collins was reviewing his papers, clearly preparing for a confrontation. "We call Mr. Eric Johnson to the stand," announced the judge. Eric rose from the witness stand and approached the court, visibly nervous but resolute. He sat down and took the oath. Diana approached him with an encouraging look. "Mr. Johnson, could you start by telling us how you obtained the information about the defendant's corrupt activities?" Diana asked, her tone serious. Eric took a deep breath before beginning. "I worked in a low-level position in the department. I observed and overheard conversations that shouldn't have been happening. I knew that Carter and Lawson were involved in illegal activities, such as embezzlement and manipulating investigations." Diana paused to let the information sink in. "And can you elaborate on the conversations and actions you witnessed?" Eric began to describe specific conversations he had overheard, detailing suspicious financial transactions and covert operations involving Carter and Lawson. He provided vivid descriptions and documented the times he was approached to participate in the bribery scheme. "Mr. Johnson, do you have any concrete evidence to support your claims?" Diana asked. Eric produced some documents and recordings from his cell phone. "These call logs and messages are from conversations I had with Carter and Lawson. The recordings show discussions about diverting funds and using their power to cover up their actions." As Eric spoke, Diana noticed the defense preparing to attack his credibility. Henry Collins stood up with a challenging expression. "Mr. Johnson, do you have any reason to want to harm the defendants?" Collins asked, his tone sharp. "Was your relationship with Carter and Lawson always friendly?" Eric looked at Collins, his voice firm. "I never had a friendly relationship with them. I saw what was happening and knew I needed to act. I'm not here for revenge, but to tell the truth." Collins continued to press, trying to create doubts about Eric's character and credibility. Diana intervened, emphasizing the consistency and accuracy of the information provided by Eric. "Mr. Collins, Mr. Johnson's credibility has been supported by several documents and recordings. He is providing a first-hand account of the defendant's illegal activities. There is no evidence suggesting he is lying or exaggerating," Diana argued. With the defense trying to discredit Eric, Diana knew the battle wasn't won yet, but the evidence presented helped to solidify the case. The judge decided to conclude the testimony and allowed the defense team to review the documents and recordings. During the lunch break, Diana met with Mark in one of the reserved areas. "How do you think the testimony was received?" Diana asked, her tone concerned. Mark appeared encouraged. "Eric did a great job, despite the pressure. His evidence is solid, and his testimony was convincing. But the defense will keep trying to attack. We need to prepare for the next stage." Diana agreed, worried about how the defense continued to attempt to undermine the witness's credibility. "We need to keep monitoring the situation and ensure that all evidence is presented clearly." The truth must prevail, regardless of the defense's tactics. When the court reconvened, Diana prepared to present the next set of evidence and witnesses. The battle was far from over, but each passing day brought justice closer to realization. Diana was determined to maintain the clarity and strength of the case, facing each challenge with courage and perseverance. Thursday of the trial brought a sense of mounting expectation and anxiety to the courtroom in Atlanta. Diana Harper and her team were nearing the end, but they knew Carter and Lawson, with the help of their attorneys, could make one last attempt to divert attention and sow doubt. Diana and Mark were reviewing documents and preparing for what could be a decisive day. "Today will be crucial," Diana said, looking at the papers spread out on the table. "The defense will likely make one final effort to discredit our investigation and witnesses. We need to be ready for anything." Mark, focused, adjusted his notes. "We have the evidence and witnesses we need, but the defense might try something unexpected. Let's stay calm and focused on the truth." In court, the judge entered and the session began. Henry Collins stood up to deliver his closing argument, his tone full of confidence and challenge. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Collins began, "the case the prosecution is trying to build against my clients is full of gaps and conjecture. The allegations presented lack a solid foundation and are supported by witnesses with questionable motives. Carter and Lawson are men of integrity, and the prosecution is trying to use dirty tactics to achieve a verdict." Diana watched attentively, her face impassive as Collins continued with his rhetoric. She knew she needed to provide a strong response to counteract the negative impact of the defense's arguments. When it was Diana's turn for the final argument, she stood and approached the court with a firm stance. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what we have seen during this trial is the stark truth about the corruption and misconduct of the defendants. Carter and Lawson used their positions of power to commit serious crimes and manipulate the system to cover up their actions." She continued to lay out the evidence, highlighting the consistency of the witness statements and the strength of the evidence presented. "We have clear records, detailed testimonies, and irrefutable evidence proving that Carter and Lawson acted corruptly and abusively. The defense may try to divert attention, but the truth is evident." After lunch, the court resumed with a surprise testimony from a new witness, a former colleague of Carter and Lawson who had been off the radar until that moment. His name was Thomas Reed, known for his discretion, but who had decided to speak out due to pressure and fear for his safety. Reed entered the courtroom with a look of nervousness. "Mr. Reed, can you tell us why you decided to testify now?" Diana asked. Thomas took a deep breath before answering. "I was afraid of retaliation, but after seeing the courage of the other witnesses, I realized I needed to do the right thing. I witnessed Carter and Lawson acting illegally and unethically on several occasions." He described specific incidents of abuse of power and corruption, providing details that corroborated the evidence already presented. The defense, visibly taken aback, tried to press Reed during cross-examination, but he remained resolute. Henry Collins, attempting to discredit Reed, asked, "You don't have any physical records or concrete proof of your claims, correct?" "No, I don't have physical records, but I witnessed the events," Reed replied firmly. "And I was there when everything happened." At the end of the day, Diana met with Mark and the rest of the team in a conference room at the courthouse. Fatigue was evident, but the atmosphere was charged with determination. "Thomas Reed gave a strong testimony," Mark commented. "This could really help strengthen our case, but we need to be prepared for a counterattack." Diana nodded, looking over the pile of documents and evidence that had been presented. "We'll continue to focus on the truth and ensure all the evidence is clear and understood. The defense might try dirty tricks, but we have a solid foundation." That night before the verdict, Diana was at home, reviewing documents and mentally preparing for the outcome of the trial. The phone rang, and it was Carla, her assistant. "Judge Harper, we received another anonymous threat. This time, they said something big will happen if the verdict isn't favorable to the defendants," Carla reported with a worried voice. Diana felt a wave of tension, but kept her composure. "Thank you for letting me know. Keep the security tight and continue monitoring for any suspicious activity. We need to stay focused and not be intimidated." As the night went on, Diana reflected on the complexity and weight of the case. The trial was nearing its end, and she knew the decisive moment was almost here. The fight for justice and truth was about to culminate, and Diana was determined to face any challenge that came her way. Friday arrived with a bright sun, contrasting with the atmosphere of tension surrounding the courthouse in Atlanta. Diana Harper and her team were prepared for the day that could determine Carter and Lawson's future. The verdict was about to be announced, and the pressure was palpable. Diana and Mark were in their office, reviewing final details and preparing for any situation that might arise. "Today is the day," Diana said with a serious expression. "We need to be ready for whatever comes." Mark, looking at the final documents, responded, "Yes, Diana. We've done an amazing job so far. We just need to stay calm and ensure the verdict reflects the truth." The courtroom was filled with spectators, reporters, and community representatives. The tension was visible on every face. Carter and Lawson were with their defense teams, nervous but trying to maintain a facade of confidence. The judge entered the room, and the court session resumed. The judge, with a solemn tone, announced that the verdict would be read. "Ladies and gentlemen, after careful consideration of the evidence and testimonies presented during this trial, I will now proclaim the verdict." The murmur in the room immediately ceased, and everyone was on edge. Diana stood beside Mark, her eyes fixed on the judge. Carter and Lawson exchanged tense glances. "Defendant Officer Brian Carter," the judge began, "is found guilty of the charges of abuse of power, corruption, and bribery. Defendant Officer Derek Lawson is also found guilty of the same charges." There was a murmur of surprise and relief in the room. Diana closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. Justice had prevailed, but the battle was far from over. Henry Collins, the defense attorney, stood up, his face a mask of frustration. "Your Honor, we request a reconsideration of the verdict. We believe there were procedural errors that affected the fairness of the trial." Diana approached the judge with a resolute tone. "Your Honor, the verdict was based on solid evidence and consistent testimonies. The defense may present arguments, but the truth has been clearly demonstrated." The judge nodded, indicating that the request for reconsideration would be reviewed. But for now, the verdict was set. After the session, Diana and Mark met with the rest of the team, including Carla and Lieutenant Hawkins. "Congratulations to everyone," Diana said with a tired smile. "It was a tough fight, but we made it." Hawkins, with a proud expression, replied, "You all did an amazing job. The verdict is a big step, but the real victory is ensuring that justice is served." Carla, still visibly relieved, added, "But there's still an outstanding issue: the anonymous threats and the pressure we received during the trial. We need to ensure that security remains heightened." Diana nodded. "Yes, security remains a priority. We'll keep monitoring the situation and ensure everyone stays protected." With the verdict announced, the focus now shifted to sentencing. Carter and Lawson would face penalties reflecting the severity of their crimes. Diana knew that the fight for justice didn't end with the verdict. The implementation of the sentence and the continuation of investigations were essential. Later, Diana was at home, reflecting on the trial. The phone rang, and it was a message from Eric. "Judge Harper, I just wanted to say thank you for everything. Thanks to you, the truth prevailed." Diana smiled, feeling a weight lifted. "Thank you, Eric. Your courage was crucial to the success of this case." As Diana prepared to rest, she knew the battle for justice was far from over. There were still many issues to resolve and challenges to face. But for today, justice had been served and the truth had triumphed. Diana was ready to continue fighting for justice, with renewed determination and a deep sense of accomplishment. After the verdict, Atlanta breathed a sigh of relief, but the victory brought with it a new set of challenges. The security of Diana Harper and her team became a top priority. The anonymous threats and the tension throughout the trial had put everyone on high alert. Diana was at the office, reviewing documents when Mark Reynolds walked in with a worried expression. "Diana, we need to discuss something urgent," he said, closing the door behind him. Diana looked up, noticing the seriousness on Mark's face. "What's happened?" "We've received a concrete threat this time," Mark began, handing Diana a sheet with an alarming message. "They said that if Carter and Lawson were convicted, something serious would happen. And we have reason to believe they're serious." Diana read the message and felt a chill run down her spine. What exactly did they say? The message is vague, but it talks about fatal consequences and specifically mentions you and your team, Mark explained. "We need to tighten security immediately." Diana nodded, troubled by the thought of everyone's safety. "Let's proceed with caution. I need to speak with Lieutenant Hawkins and ensure that all protective measures are in place." Diana went to Hawkins' office, finding him in the middle of phone calls and meetings. "Lieutenant Hawkins, we need to discuss security. We've received a new threat and need to ensure everyone is protected." Hawkins looked at Diana with a serious tone. "We're aware of the threat and have already taken some additional precautions. There will be extra patrols around work sites and residences of everyone involved in the case." Diana frowned. "We can't underestimate this. The threat is real and must be taken with full seriousness. We need 24/7 protection and a robust security strategy." Hawkins agreed. "I'll increase the security level and make sure everyone has adequate surveillance. We'll maintain constant communication and update on any developments." With security measures reinforced, Diana and her team continued working on the final details of the investigations and planning the next steps in the case. However, the fear of retaliation still hung in the air. The situation had reached a point where the team needed to stay vigilant not just during office hours, but also outside of work. That night, Diana was at home, trying to relax. The sound of the phone jolted her awake. It was Carla, her assistant. "Judge Harper, you should know there was an attempted break-in at your office. The police are already there." Diana's heart raced. "What do you mean, attempted break-in?" "It looks like someone tried to force open the front door, but security managed to stop them," Carla informed. "There's no significant damage, but it's a serious alert." Diana took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Notify security to increase vigilance at all locations. I'm heading to the office to see what's going on." Diana arrived at the office and found Lieutenant Hawkins and his team examining the scene. "Judge Harper, fortunately, the attempt was thwarted before it could cause more damage," Hawkins said. "We're reinforcing security even further and monitoring all entrances and exits." Diana looked around, feeling an increasing sense of vulnerability. "We need to ensure this doesn't happen again. If they're willing to do this, we need to stay one step ahead." Hawkins nodded. "We're on high alert. Any suspicious activity will be immediately investigated." Diana, still unsettled, returned home. She gathered with Mark and Carla for an urgent meeting. "We need to make sure everyone involved is aware of the situation and prepared. Security must be our top priority." Mark agreed. "Yes, Diana. Let's review all protocols and ensure that all security measures are implemented." Carla, concerned, added, "It's also important to keep a direct line with the police and make sure any threat is addressed immediately." The meeting concluded, and Diana sat alone, reflecting on the complexities and risks associated with her work. She knew that fighting corruption and injustice came with its own dangers, but she was determined not to let fear paralyze her. As Diana prepared to rest, the reality of the threat hung over her. The fight for justice didn't end with the verdict. It also included ensuring the safety and well-being of those standing up against corrupt power. The following morning, Diana received an email with a message of support from a civil rights organization. "Judge Harper, just a note to thank you for your courage and the work you're doing. Know that we are here to support you and your team in whatever you need." Diana smiled, feeling a bit of relief. The external support was a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. She was ready to face the challenges ahead and continue to seek justice, no matter the obstacles. The week following the verdict for Carter and Lawson was marked by a wave of relief and celebration, but also by a sense of apprehension. Diana Harper and her team had achieved a significant victory, but the road ahead was filled with challenges. Diana was at the office, reflecting on the case while reviewing final reports. Mark Reynolds entered with a tired but satisfied expression. "Diana, The newspapers are full of praise for your work. You managed to expose corruption and secure justice." Diana smiled with gratitude. It was a team effort. Without everyone's help, this wouldn't have been possible. But there's still much to be done, and the work doesn't end here. Carla entered the room, carrying a folder full of documents. "Judge Harper, these are the final reports and records of community reactions. Additionally, we've received messages of support and also some new threats that need to be reviewed." Diana looked at Carla with a mix of relief and concern. "Let's prioritize analyzing these threats. We can't afford to let our guard down now." As the day went on, the security team continued to monitor and reinforce protection around the office and the residences of those involved. The feeling that the situation was under control began to stabilize, but Diana knew the impact of the case would reverberate for a long time. In the afternoon, Diana was invited to a meeting with the police chief and the policy review committee. The goal was to discuss necessary changes within the department to prevent future corruption cases. Police Chief Robert Jackson started the meeting. "Judge Harper, we'd like to discuss the recommendations you and your team have for reforming the department. We need to learn from what happened and ensure public trust is restored." Diana, with a determined look, responded, "We need a comprehensive review of internal practices and policies. There should be greater transparency and a robust reporting system for misconduct. Additionally, establishing an independent commission could help ensure oversight remains uncompromised." Robert Jackson nodded. "I agree. We're committed to implementing these changes. The community needs to feel that the department is acting with integrity and responsibility." The meeting continued with discussions on the details of the reforms, and Diana felt she was taking concrete steps toward ensuring a fairer future. By the end of the week, Diana and her team were invited to a community event where they received thanks and honors from various civil rights groups and community leaders. The event was held in a local park, and the atmosphere was one of celebration and hope. During the event, Diana was approached by a young activist named Jasmine. "Judge Harper, I just wanted to say thank you. Your work has made a big difference for us. Now, we feel there is hope for real change." Diana smiled, touched by Jasmine's words. "Real change comes from the courage and determination of people like you. What we've done is just a step, but together we can continue to fight for justice and everyone's rights." As the ceremony unfolded, Diana reflected on the journey she had traveled. The case had been a monumental challenge, but also an opportunity to bring about significant change. The fight against corruption didn't end with a verdict. It began with implementing reforms and fostering a culture of integrity and accountability. At the end of the event, Diana was with her team in a small meeting. "It's been a long road, and there's much more to do. We need to keep working to ensure that justice and truth prevail. Thank you all for your effort and dedication. Together, we made a difference." Mark, visibly moved, replied, "You led with courage and integrity, Diana. That's inspiring. Let's continue working for a better future with the same determination." Diana, looking at the team that had been essential in the fight for justice, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The courtroom victory was just the beginning of ongoing work to ensure a fairer and more transparent system. And so, with renewed determination, Diana was ready to face the next challenges, always guided by the truth and aiming for justice as her ultimate goal.